Hi, everybody. We're just going to give it a few more minutes, make sure that people get in and get a little bit settled. And so if you give us just 2 more minutes, we will come right back and get started with this exciting program. And in the meantime, please enjoy the music. Hi, everybody. How are you? First of all, welcome. We are delighted that everybody is here. You may see panelists kind of jump on from time to time. Some are coming in at different times. Welcome, Wendy. So today, I'm really excited about the program that we're going to present to you guys. I think it's important. But before we do that, what I want to say is what I always say to you all. Thank you and congratulations. We're not done. We're not even remotely close to done. But the work that every single one of you has done to date is beginning to actually show results. Meetings with congressmen and senators, all of the things that we need to do. So while I know that people are going to be a little frustrated, as we all are, somebody said something very valuable to me this morning, and I told them that I was going to steal it. So Russell Callahan, if you're on this call, I'm stealing it. Here's what he said: nothing moves slower than the gears of government. So just remember, they're not nimble small business people. And that's not fair to us, but it is what it is. So today, our intent is to talk with all of you about advocacy, where we are, what we need you to do to teach you to continue to be the amazing foot soldiers that you are. A couple of housekeeping notes. One of them is, please put your questions in the Q&A. We will be monitoring them. It is to the left of your chat button. We will monitor chat and Q&A, but sometimes it's easier if you can just get them in the Q&A, and I'll probably keep reminding you of that in the chat. But first, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion, sharing some updates, thoughts, and things of that nature. And so without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome Whit Askew, who many of you may or may not have ever seen before, but Whit is one of our 2 amazing lobbyists with subject matter. Whit is on the congressional side and on the Republican side. Something I learned: lobbyists are on different sides. So, you know, I've had an education in 11 months and it's been fascinating. But Whit's going to share some information with you about advocacy as a whole, and then we will keep going. So Whit, thank you for all of your support, all of your guidance, and thank you for being here today.
Nancy, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are, I guess. I have to say, it's been, I do a lot of work for a lot of clients in a lot of industries, and if it's any consolation to those of you beyond those that I talk to on a daily basis on the panel here, I've not enjoyed working with a client more than I have with Live Events Coalition. And it's in part because you're real and you are meaningful, and you're not what I do for a living, which in some ways is refreshing, maybe some ways challenging. I don't know how you want to define that, but in any event, I mean that. I was thinking about yesterday. I've been in DC for 20 years. I'm a lobbyist. I worked on Capitol Hill for Speaker of the House. Like, I kind of understand how it works. And the comment that you made about the slowness of the gears of government, even in normal circumstances, is incredibly true. And I think we all know we're not operating in normal circumstances. So it's even more true. And with that comes frustration, but also comes opportunity. And I was thinking about, today is February 18th, and February 18th, a year ago, this organization didn't even exist. It wasn't even a brainchild. And it's fascinating to me that in less than a year, a bunch of small business, live events, supplier, all of the above experts that you are, have rallied together, created an organization out of thin air. Most, if not all of you, had no background in advocacy whatsoever, because you are doing what you do so well. And that's a hard way to start. But it's important that you did it. I respect Nancy, Dwayne, Dewan, getting to work with Wendy now, and others from the leadership team, for rallying the troops. But I think importantly, y'all are the troops. And I want to commend you before I kind of get into some of the more tactical things that I think are important so that you can go out on your missions. A couple of other thoughts, and I think it's important for context purposes. Modern advocacy, as opposed to kind of just a decade or two ago when it was more decisions being made in smoke-filled rooms, or at least that's what it shows in the movies. But modern advocacy really is an all of the above approach. And the way I view that, and the role that each of you have to play, and you have, for some of you who have been engaged in grassroots and talking with members of Congress in your home footprints and so forth, I don't want this to be redundant, and I don't want you to view what some of the things I'm saying as disregarding the important work you've done, because it is important. But I also want to be somewhat basic 101, if you will, for those who may not have been as engaged, but are ready and ripe to do that at this important point in the ballgame. So the way I view modern advocacy writ large in Washington, which is different than in state capitals or with local governments, because the amount of information that lawmakers and their staffs are consuming from so many angles is beyond your comprehension. And so how do we get on their radar and stay on it? And I think that's something that Live Events has done well, but we've still got to continue to do even better in the weeks and months ahead. But it's bringing research, which I think is a cornerstone for any narrative to deploy to the Capitol. And each of you have played an important role in providing not just case studies, but actual data about the implications that your businesses and workforces have faced amidst this pandemic, because it helps us to then go as lobbyists and as subject matter experts, which you are. It makes our job easier and more credible to sell, as opposed to, just a hired gun like I might be because I've got a relationship. They may listen, but they need to hear it from you and how it's really impacting constituents back home and the economies that you impact in their backyards. So research is a cornerstone. We have a good foundation there, and I commend the leadership for helping build that. I feel good about where we are there. And it's been helpful in making sure that we have gotten some of the legislative victories that we have in fact gotten through the first two packages that are now law, whether it's through the PPP program, PUA, unemployment insurance, and some other small business things that were designed specifically to help entities like yours. But it's also communications. And I think with that comes the harnessing of the stories, the anecdotes that each of you bring to bear, and then us packaging it in a way that's compelling to aid in our shoe leather lobbying efforts here in Washington. You know, we're all having to do this in a virtual setting. And so through earned media opportunities, which many of you are able to develop in your communities, which captures the attention of members of Congress and their staffs, probably as well as anything. I guarantee you they read clips of their local newspapers. And then you marry that with some of the compelling narratives that we're able to shape with direct outreach at senior staff and congressional levels on your behalf. Those are all important. But the piece that's perhaps the glue to all of this is what each of you control in a way that I can't. And that is your ability to organically outreach to your staff, the staff of your members of Congress, and your members directly. And I am perfectly comfortable and have been pleased with the efforts to date to blanket cover. I call it education, meaning lawmakers and their staffs are hearing from real business and constituent leaders on the needs and the policies that they need to have enacted to help their businesses survive, their employees go back to work safely, and hopefully in the future to get back to normalcy. And if your enterprises, if each of you are not engaging in whatever way you can, whether it's through letter writing campaigns, through some of the platforms that Dwayne can walk through with you, whether it's social engagement, meaning like a simple Facebook post on your congressperson's site or a Twitter engagement. You know, these are the things that we do in our day-to-day lives with our friends and families. Well, there's no different in how you should interface with your elected officials in Washington. And I'm telling you, they pay attention to that. Now, you always want to be courteous and respectful. And I would encourage each of you to help what we're trying to do in Washington by bolstering that. Be stern in the sense that you can highlight the necessity for policies that are important for your survival. You don't have to sugarcoat how bad things are, but you can do that obviously in a respectful way. You know, even something as simple as if you're talking to a congressman or a congresswoman, call them congressman or congresswoman. Same for a senator. You know, and I think that's just general logic. You know, as you apply in your day-to-day business interfacing, I think the same general premise applies with your communications to Capitol Hill. But importantly, and I think, you know, Ivory and others on the live events team administration are helping to harness all the moving parts that you're doing so that we can then leverage and build on the outreach, the engagement, the conversations in whatever form you're able to do them at a more granular level to actually try to push legislative language on paper and then build support for it, which is, I think, where we now stand as an entity. We don't have to get into, unless Dwayne, you know, you want me to down the road, get into kind of where we are with the legislative landscape itself. But I will say this, we are at a new crossroads, meaning that your 101 level engagement, again, whether it's through letters, whether it's through social and digital, whether it's through picking up the phone, whether it's through in-person or virtual meetings, as you continue and are able to build on those in the weeks ahead, it's going to be really important because we're going to pivot our asks on the Hill in the coming weeks, not just to, we need second bites at PPP apples and we need an extension of unemployment insurance, to asking harder things like, let's find a way to carve out liquidity and money specifically for businesses like yours that are not named restaurants, that are not named live events venues or, you know, or stage venue type facilities, which have gotten some support thus far. I think those are the key areas that we can build on, but your engagement with your members of Congress in any way you can, we can then shape it into less raw material and more targeted, lead on a target, to use a Southern term that some of my friends might understand, that actually moves the ball forward in a way that I think each of you are going to need in future legislative proposals. So I really don't want to talk at you, but instead would rather respond and or ask questions. You know, we can get in the weeds on various things. I just want to leave one anecdote as to an example of what I'm alluding to. You know, and Dwayne and the team, in collaboration with some of you, worked with us to shape an introductory letter that we sent on behalf of Live Events Coalition to every single newly elected freshman member of Congress. So it was roughly 50 or 60, give or take, members of Congress, Republicans, Democrats, House and Senate. And you'd be surprised, and it was introductory. It was who we are, why we matter, why you are hearing from us, and why we need your help. Simple as that. Some of you saw it. Hopefully many of you sent it along to your contacts as well. But as a result of that, it is creating new opportunities for us to engage with lawmakers, with you. And I'll use an example in Florida. We're working on, you know, a member of Congress there who said, we want to learn more. And we bring in a constituent there. We bring in Dwayne. We make all these parts more compelling, both at the granular district level, but also, you know, at the political level, which is some things that my colleagues and I can help assist in ways that perhaps Live Events Coalition is less structured to do. So I say that as an example. These things do matter. Not each, well, I should say each of these moving parts, the grassroots, the research, the communications, and the shoe leather lobbying, political engagement, none of them by themselves are silver bullets. And I hope that none of you believe that they are, because unfortunately they're not. But we have to operate as a fine oiled engine. And I think in less than a year, this organization has built an engine, put oil in it, run the oil out, and we're now putting a new fresh coat of oil into it so that we can really rock and roll, much like I was to that intro Miami Vice style music that I was picking on Nancy about before we started. So with that, I'm sure I missed some things and I'm happy to address them, but let me yield back because I do want to have a dialogue. And again, I'm happy to be part of this effort and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Whit, we appreciate everything that you have done and all of your care and feeding, and we look forward to continuing this wonderful education, and hopefully soon we won't have to because we're all back at work. But we will continue on because we have learned amazing things. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne Thomas. I don't know, there may be people on this call who are not yet familiar with the infamous and amazing Dwayne Thomas, but Dwayne is from Oregon. He sits on the national board and he is the director of government relations. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne, who I know I couldn't live without. So it's all yours, sir.
Nancy's not telling you that I actually was mowing her lawn all summer. So there is that. Hi, folks. Once again, happy Thursday. Thank you for being here. The fact that you're here tells me that your appetite for something that looks like advocacy for our industry is certainly there. I know I don't have to tell you that the need is there. So we all agree on these 2 points. I want to build on what Whit was just talking about, and thank you, Whit, for that, by the way. I'll start by saying I want to take away a little bit of fear, if I can, if there is any in the room still, because I certainly had it at the beginning. I'm not an expert in this, knew nothing about this 11 months ago, have far more truths to uncover than I have already from my own skill set as an advocate. So let me tell you that you are likely to feel imposter syndrome, and that's okay. This comes with the territory. Let me tell you that you'll get over it, and that the best thing about what we're asking you to do is that it involves a story, can be your story. And the great thing about this story that we're telling you, careful with the word great here, is that it's true. There's not really any embellishment needed for our story to have impact. You can tell it just for your business or for the job that you lost to your member of Congress or to their staff. You can say it just how it happened, and I'll bet it'll have impact, just the way we need it to. So do lean on your story as not the objective. The objective is to get us through this, get us help to make it through this. And that's on the worker level, that's on the business level, that's for all of our vertical markets. That's for no matter what craft you practice. We want help for everybody. That's our objective. So your story becomes the cornerstone of the structure that we're going to use to get this done. So we've helped craft an industry story, and that's available to everybody. It's already been sent to your state leadership. If you don't have it, you can certainly request it. The story is told through a one-page letter at the moment, and there's been other one-page letters, but this is the current state of affairs. It's told by a beautiful slide deck, about 9 pages long, that really encapsulates what our industry is, what has happened to us, the numbers that we've seen in terms of loss, and what we think it'll take to get us through this. So it's a very compelling piece. And now, as of late, we now have actual real small business case studies that we've created so far, 3 different infographics for. One is that everybody can use. It's 3 quick, hard-hitting stories from 3 different kinds of businesses across the country. We have one in New York, we have one here in my home state of Oregon, and we have one in, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's, stop me if I'm wrong, Minnesota or Texas, Kentucky. So that is available, and we're just now starting to roll that out. And we've started to make other focused case studies, infographics for key states like New York, where Senate Majority Leader Schumer is the senator. And we're working on we have one for Oregon. We've got the head of finance in the Senate in Oregon here. We're working on one for Nevada. We're working on Minnesota and other key areas where we know that having an all one state infographic like that will really help. So we'll ask you for things like that, and we appreciate that. So what can you do now that I've said that? We do ask you for things that are very focused. Like we ask you a very personal question, and I've got about 20 responses so far. People willing to share their numbers from your business. What happened to you in 20? Don't sugarcoat it. Tell us what really happened. What was your gross in 2019? What did it end up being in 2020? How many employees did you lose? Tell me what you had to do. How much unforgivable debt have you taken on? Did you have to sell your house? Did you dip into your retirement fund? If you are willing to tell that story, that's what goes into these case studies. So that's one thing you already may be doing. And if you're considering doing it, I encourage you to speak with us offline, because that is something that can really help. The next thing is what hinted at is that outreach to your own U.S. House of Representatives congressperson in your district. That's key, because we need a constituent in that district to start that conversation. So now we're going on to the part where we're talking about tactics. If you make that outreach and you let us know, we will track it, tell us who you spoke with. Or if you just sent a letter to the general inbox, tell us that. Whatever outreach you made, make it happen. Do please try to coordinate with your state leadership if you can, because in most of our states, there's somebody helping keep track. Oh, do we have anybody in District 7? All these questions are being asked in many, if not most of our states. If you don't sense that they are, please reach out to us and we'll try to hook you up with who might be coordinating. And it may be that there isn't anybody coordinating. Maybe that's you that becomes that person. Know that if you have an hour to spend in a week on this outreach to your 2 senators and your local rep, your local US rep, you're going to save us 4 or 5 hours of having to figure out how to do it ourselves. We have to come find you. And that means that we have more time to circle back around. Once we know who you've reached out to, we can circle back around to their staff, that member's staff in Capitol Hill, to their Washington. Subject matter and us can then do that because you've started the conversation. We say, not literally, but something to the effect of, we understand you've already heard from one of your staffers in your home district, and this is what got said. We'd like to expand on that a little bit. Is there perhaps time to meet with you? What we're doing here is not only just filling the echo chamber with our story, and that is, as I mentioned, key. We're also starting to populate the idea that relief is imperative. And while 2020, we found out, was largely about just becoming a recognized industry, and we're not quite there yet. we're so much closer to that than we've ever been, that these conversations about relief now start to really have the impact that we need them to have. Because we're seeing them call out independent little bits of our world. So we're filling in those gaps, we're filling in those blanks, we're recommending what has to be done. So we have the materials with the talking points to give you. Your state leadership should have them. If you are still unsure of how to get them, please reach out. This is, and it's been alluded to a couple times here already in this meeting, but I'll put it to you like this. We all know a lot about the business cycle of our world, and it's a very closed loop. We start with the first client contact, and from there, an event gets built out. And it might take 3 months, it might take 6 months, it might take 2 years, but it definitely has a final date to it. It has a deadline. There's no such thing as doors opening at 7 p.m. on the 19th of March, so that's the day of the event, and us not being ready. There's no such thing. You're ready or you're out of business. Now, it's just that government doesn't really work that way. Yes, there are deadlines, there are incremental deadlines, but the part for all of us in this room, the folks on this panel especially included, is that we have had to unlearn that core sensibility around a deadline and around an urgency. Doesn't take the truth of the urgency away, but it forces us to understand, to recognize the wins where we get them and build on those. If we just go, well, damn it, we didn't get the thing we asked for, we might miss the incremental wins in our frustration. So I want to caution everybody how very maddening this can be. And you have to grapple that on the inside of you somehow, but please know it's adding up to more and more steam in the engine. We're actually having meaningful conversations. And some of our conversations we're having, you include the word no. Anybody who's ever been in sales know how valuable that word is, because it's a numbers game. You're not going to get it yes every time when you pitch your product. You're going to get no at least 5, 10, 15, 20 times before somebody says yes and buys your product. So when we hear no, that matters, because we know where not to expend our energy at this moment. Go on to the next thing. You're that much closer to yes. I want to call a little bit on my colleagues here. I know that I had some success early on, and I think that put gas in my tank, because I was able to get through to both my senators and 3 of our 5 reps with fairly easily, clear back in April and May, and have had a conversation going there. And I'll tell you a little bit what that's like. It's really just, they're nicer than you think. They're more open than you think. They listen really, really well. And please know that these staffers that you're going to talk to are golden. These are amazing folks that do hard work. And for every one of the conversations they have with you, they had 20 more that day with another constituent that has another urgent need. And their patience is universally amazing. If you haven't already talked to one, do be ready for that reality. Do be respectful of their time, say please and thank you, all of those things. It's just common logic stuff, but even more so in this, they're working for all of us, and it's a hard job. So I can tell you that I had early success. You just have to pick up the phone and try. It won't always be that easy. If you're in a state that has a particularly key leader, for instance, it will be a very hard nut to crack. We can help you with that, but it's the trying of it that's the most important. I'd like to call on Andy, actually, because Andy was one of the first guys that inspired me, because he had so much luck getting through to his state's leadership, and had great conversation with Senator Bennett early on about the Restart Act, and actually aligned me with one of my first in-person meetings with members of Congress outside my state. And Andy, if you don't mind sharing your story a little bit about what did you do to get that ball rolling that allowed you to have such good relationships going forward, and what were the steps you took?
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. I think, honestly, I think most folks are just scared to even begin the process of trying to reach their legislators and their representatives. So that's one thing, is just, they're designed to, and their purpose really is to represent their constituents, and they understand that. And they're designed to be able to reply to really everyone at a certain interval in time. And so Some are more organized than others. Some representatives I've reached out to even on the state level, state representatives take longer than national level representatives. So what I've found, like the biggest lesson for me, and this is sort of like across the board too, and I have experience in sales, so I definitely agree with everything Dwayne was saying, but one big thing for me is to understand that folks that work in the government are just normal people. They're normal people like you and I, and they have fears, they have doubts, they have concerns, you know, and I think sometimes we put them up on this pedestal and we think that they're, you know, these like omniscient, you know, all-knowing, highly intelligent, perfect beings. And the reality is that's not true. They're just people. And so when you begin to understand that, then you also begin to understand how to communicate with them better. So, you know, I see a lot of folks make the mistake of like either being too nice or too, I guess, aggressive on calls. And that's not how you talk to folks in real life. So it's just, you know, how would you talk to folks in real life, and how you can bring that conversation to that level, I think is important. In doing that, I think who you're talking to, especially like being honest with what you're saying, like being authentic and being honest, not like, you know, saying my business needs $1 million if it doesn't, and being able to articulate the reality of the situation so that you build trust with who you're talking to. But it got to the point for me where, I mean, like I could call any number of politicians on the national and state level I was sometimes up at 10:30 p.m. at night having conversations because I knew that they wouldn't be busy at 10:30 at night, and I knew that they were devoted to their job and that they would be willing to listen at that moment in time. And that's the reality, is there's a lot of hardworking folks there. So you know, that's just a little tidbit from me. I'd say, you know, be honest, be respectful, but at the same time, be straight up with what you're saying. Don't be a jerk, but also don't sugarcoat stuff. I mean, a lot of times I see folks just avoiding the ask. It's like in sales, like eventually at some point you have to ask for something. And if you never ask for something, you're just making friends, then nothing's going to get done. So yeah, I think that kind of summarizes my experience and what led to having a really good relationship here in Colorado.
Thanks,
Dwayne,
Andy. Much appreciated.
Would it be okay if I added one other point to Andy's really good ones there? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Just want to make sure that you guys are succinct so that we can get to Q&A. That's all I have.
Well, I can address it there, but I do want to say, because the converse to what Andy said, and I agree with everything he said, is some of you could be saying, does my engagement with rank and file member of Congress really matter in the grand scheme of things when they have just one vote? There's 535. The answer is yes, because process-wise, this is where I get paid to do what I do, is we can take the contact here, the contact there, swirl it together, and then make it important to leadership and some other members of Congress who are more senior in the roles they have to play in the decision-making process. And I'll say it kind of as an example. If Chuck Schumer, who's now the majority leader of the US Senate, has not heard from, you know, let's just pick a number, 20 of his Senate Democratic colleagues on an issue that we're bringing to him, he's going to say one of two things. One, go back and talk to your people and I want to hear from them. Or two, if he's not heard from them, then that means that it must not be important enough to have gotten onto the radar screen. And so what I'm trying to say here is each individual connection in whatever form you're able does matter. And then we can take it and shape it and make it seem even more important or bigger than that one contact might have been for those that you may not be talking to as frequently, but are very high in the decision-making food chain, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I'll tack on to that. If you're our state leadership and you have already had these conversations with us about our current outreach program, reporting back to us what's going on is really critical, and include the person that you talk to. We can, just the name is fine. You don't need to send all their contact information. We have that, but that's what we circle back on and build out from, is that initial that grassroots level contact is what we're going to take the ball and run with. I want to ask Wendy right now. Wendy's from Minnesota and is just a couple weeks into service with our Government Affairs Squad. I kind of spotlight Wendy because she has been active in Minnesota with all of her members and with local initiatives as well from the get-go. I just got off a call with their state folks and was blown away by the amount of participation. So obviously they've done a great job at keeping people engaged. But Wendy, I'd like to know, in terms of advocacy, what's been your favorite tactic so far to get a conversation started with say, Representative Angie or with Senator Smith or Senator Klobuchar?
Yeah, I think the way I would answer that is being persistent. So, you know, I've reached out and then you get this feeling like, should I keep reaching out or should I let it go? Or, you know, what should I do? And I talked to somebody else here locally in Minnesota that's sort of a power broker. And he said, keep pinging them, because that's what they're there for. They're there to serve the constituents and they're used to it. And this is what they do every day, all day. So keep bugging them. So I've consistently kept bugging people over the last several months. And the most recent letter that we kicked off here 2 weeks ago has actually been really successful. So, you know, I sent that to two of our senators, the two senators, and then my district rep and then a few other district reps, and started getting responses almost immediately, which I was really thrilled with. And so that has actually now led to 3 different calls with both of our senators and also with Congresswoman Angie Craig. And we're continuing that. So I think having the constituent involved in those conversations has been super important because they want to hear from those people, right? So we've been really careful to make sure that any calls that we do have, we have constituents on those calls as well. But I think just getting them to respond, it's that persistence. Just keep trying.
Do you have a favorite method? Would you rather pick up the phone or would you rather type an email? What's worked better?
I would rather type an email, but that's more me. That's just more how I tend to operate. It helps me kind of keep track of what's going on with everything. I'd rather have it in writing so I can track it and trace it back to what's been happening. So that for me has been effective, but I do think it helps to get sort of the templates coming out of national, especially for people who are newer to this that may not know what to say. I know at the beginning, Dwayne, when you and I were starting to work together, I didn't really know what to say. And so I would reach out to you and say, what got tips for me? What should I put in this? And then you would help me kind of craft it. Now I know what to do. But at the start, so don't be afraid to reach out to any of us on the team here. If you're not sure what to say or you need some guidance in crafting that first message, we're happy to help with that.
Yeah, I'm a writer when it comes to email, and I will trust that first. I don't trust myself not to ramble though. So I always try to set the stage with the email and let people see I am capable of a concise sentence and won't just go on and on. That way, now we have a relationship, and if I do go on a little bit, you'll hopefully forgive me. Thanks, Wendy. And right now, I think I have one last question for the panel here before we get on to Q&A. Dewan, can you talk a little bit about, what's impressed me and why I thought you really belonged on this committee is you seem to be connected. Can you talk a little bit about how connections matter that have allowed you to get through and help us find constituents in districts that aren't even your state, how you know people who know, how have you been able to leverage that? And not everybody will have that, but where did you find it where you didn't realize you even had it?
Short of talking to people in the grocery store line, I mention this to everybody that I come in contact with shamelessly. I was on the phone with my daughter 2 nights ago. Honey, your husband does real estate development in Sacramento. Do you guys know any politicians? You're like, oh gosh, I don't know. Wait, there's a representative who just moved next door to us, Doris Matsui. I'm like, okay, you're going to have tea with Doris. And I go to the spreadsheet that is being maintained by our coalition, the government affairs thing, and find that she has in fact been sent a letter by Katie Whelan, and my daughter is going to follow up with her. So, but back to your point, it's really just talking to people. Who do you know? How do you know? And I know I'm working with the New Jersey and the New York leaders in the coalition, And we're actually being as strategic as, okay, we've got the New York 23rd district. What are the towns in there? Let's find some LEC members or businesses that we can engage. And those constituent letters that they send an email that's heartfelt. I have this business. I've been in business this long. We're in trouble. Please take a look at these two attachments, which is the Live Event Coalition letter and the infographics. Guys, in the last week and a half, there have been dozens of responses back. They normally come within a day or two. It comes from a district staff person. I know we're not talking to the leadership, but we're talking to people that will say, I'd like to learn a little more. Let us know that, because then we'll have the constituent on the call. Either Dwayne, Wendy, and I will be on there as well with our show in terms of talking about the industry, and we're able to engage with them. They will listen, they will ask questions. I've been blown away to hear staffers say, yeah, you know what? My son got married this summer and there were only 14 people there. We can't wait to do the event. Another one yesterday, I hear everything you're saying. In fact, my brother has had to reschedule his wedding twice. So back to someone's point about these are real people, and to be able to have that kind of conversation is amazing. Please report back to us, because then we're going to send that straight to subject matter and they're going to follow up. So I'm understanding now how the layering works as we ratchet our way up to the leadership, up to getting a champion, up to writing a bill and circling back with those people as well. So I know when I start getting those texts at 8:46 at night, it's been somebody who's leading in New York. It's like, oh my God, Representative Delgado wants to meet with us. So all of this is going, guys, I don't know what, when I was writing letters back in the spring, in the summer, I felt like it was a voice crying in the wilderness. Now that's not the case. I don't know what's the difference. I don't know, but we're getting the response back and it feels so good.
You want to know the difference is the process. So the first two legislative packages were essentially done by 4 people in a room, the top 2 leaders in both parties in the House and Senate. Not quite the same way now. And so you've got more members now engaged in the process and want to work. So this is why now is so much more important. Not that it wasn't important before, but there's a greater opportunity. And DeJuan, you laid it out so well that we've got to take advantage of, because the process is going to allow us to.
Absolutely, DeJuan. Thank you so much for that. And I want to just reiterate what DeJuan said. When it comes time to actually have that meeting with that staffer, we are there for you. DeJuan and Wendy and I are creating kind of a show that we may take on the road. I don't know, but we're very well. I hate to use the term lubricated because it sounds like we just got drunk, but we've got the machine running very correctly. We play off of each other really well. We know when it's our turn. We know what kind of things to focus on. We can be there to help you get through this first meeting. So don't think you have to take it all on your own. I want to get to Q&A. What do you got, Nancy?
So let's see what we got here. There are 2 questions that are related to the Restaurant Act. And we know that the reason for that is because there's also some catering elements that go along with it for our caterers. Do we have anything updated on the Restaurant Act? And Kelly has said that Schumer is apparently or potentially walking back some support for caterers. Do we know anything about that?
That last bit I haven't heard. Have you, Whit?
No, I mean, look, the current legislative proposal that was just marked up in the House committees last week and will pass the U.S. House next week. I mean, that's what's going to become law, with the exception of, and we don't have to get into reconciliation because it's an arcane process, but in short, the bill that will pass the House next week is what will become law before March 4 or by March 14th, with the exception of things that are struck out by the Senate because of a process that will have nothing to do with anything you care about. So I'm trying to say it because it's super complicated stuff. So for this current bite at the apple, I've not heard of anything in particular about walking back. There is some language within the Restaurant Act that does help the catering sector. And I would anticipate that that would remain unless it was struck out, and I don't know it, in the committee process that finished last week. That's a different process than what will become the Reconciliation 2 package, which you're already starting to hear a lot of talk about, which is where we're going to try to live with our bold asks as it relates to, it's going to be a much bigger package. It's going to take more time, but it's also going to create opportunity for industries like ours who've not yet gotten targeted relief the same way that that a few have thus far.
I'll tell to answer what's in it. Sorry.
That leads to one question that I think might be helpful, because I think we probably have some new folks on, and I'm really delighted about that. But can you, in short, explain what the legislative asks that we have right now and how or if they've changed from 6 months ago?
Well, 6 months ago, we decided to change the way we asked for things and just go with the PPP because we knew Congress, that's what they were going to do. We decided not to bucket, and we withdrew, specifically calling out Restart because it didn't seem to have the legs that we needed it to. And we knew that what we would have the best shot at was to support the PPP second draw. So we went there. Our asks are different now. We're recognizing that PPP is not a great fit for a pretty big percentage of our small businesses. We're seeing people say, I just can't get it all forgiven, so I'm not going to take a second draw because I can't take on any more debt. So really all the flags got raised for us by the beginning of January when we knew that the last bill was being actively rolled out. We changed over to basically we're asking for grants. Here's why. We saw that there's now almost two examples of it. There's one for sure, and that's the shuttered venues grants. We see that there's language already built for this, and Congress loves to take language that already exists and laws that already exist and aid programs that already exist and build out from them. They're loath to build new programs. So we're not specifically saying build us a new grant program, but we're still grappling with the right leadership offices to see, would you rather have us build on SVOG or would you rather build us a new one? We know we're going to have to drop a piece of legislation to get it done. So I want to circle back to restaurants because that question is as to what it includes is still open. And I have read the bill, and knowing that A, it's not passed officially, but B, it's pretty much the substance is what the substance is right now. And that is it's a grant program that's going to be based on making up the difference between your 2019 revenues and your 2020 revenues. I can tell you that caterers are included in the language. I can tell you that it is not impossible for them to get ousted from the language after it gets passed. There's surprisingly little information in these bills, by the way. What happens then is the Treasury is going to negotiate and create the rules with the SBA, taking the sense of Congress, what Congress intended, and turn it into real operating rules, basically. That's the best way I can put it. And then the program rolls, and pretty much how you read the bill will come out of that program, but sometimes there's subtle changes that you hadn't read into the bill that the SBA and the Treasury figured out had to be sussed out. That could be one of them, probably won't. So right now, that's how the program looks. I have one key thing to say about it. The Restaurant Act was looking for upwards of $290 billion. This is going to get funded at 25. So it is slim. It's going to go fast, but it's the basis from which we can build back. We can build through and get more appropriations, perhaps in another piece of legislation. You have to have this to start with, and then you climb onto the top of it and you yell again, this wasn't enough. And they can see because the money was all gone in a week. It happened with the CARES Act. It could happen with this again. So that's what we know about restaurants right now. It's not yet a rule. Nancy, you're muted.
I'm always on mute. Two follow-up questions. The first one is regarding the Restaurant Act. And it says, can we talk about the 45% after PPP is subtracted? Someone else mentioned that if you'd taken funding already, you couldn't take money from the Restaurant Act. And I'm not sure if that was from the first draw or this current draw.
Right now, if the shuttered venues was in the last bill, okay? So they didn't want people to double dip. So they made you pick between PPP and shuttered venues. They really want you to apply for shuttered venues if you qualify, and they're not going to let you apply for both. That's going to boot you out.
Is
So
that the same
this,
thing with restaurants?
no, restaurants is new. So they're addressing the fact that by the time this passes, a bunch of restaurants will have already taken out second draw PPP. So you will be backing that out of your difference. So it's based on, take your 2019 revenues, subtract your 2020 revenues. That's your base grant amount after you back out your PPP reward for your forgiven PPP amounts.
Wonderful, thank you. Jessica is asking, New York State has done their outreach to freshmen, congressmen, and women, and wants to know, is there any reason to follow up locally? If so, how should they do that? Should they reach out to us? I added those two pieces to the question.
Whit, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, did you say they had already done outreach, or I
Yes.
didn't understand the first part of the question?
So they've done letter outreach to all freshmen, congressmen, and women. Is there any reason for them to follow up locally? And they have 6 freshmen from New York.
Right. Yeah. So I think the answer is yes. I mean, if they've already sent a letter, that may or may not have gone into a black hole, I think it's wise to recalibrate engagement in whatever form. I mean, one thing I wanted to say earlier when talking about, I think, Wendy, you were asking email versus phone. I'm not so sure it's the same in district offices, but in Washington, no one's at work, including a lot of Hill staff that are physically still working from their house, not their congressional office. Now, that's changing as time goes on, but I say that because in a lot of ways, phone calls are harder to actually get someone to either call you back or to answer in the first place because of the dynamic we all are operating in. Unless you have a pre-existing relationship of which they're going to call you back because they know you, like you, whatever it is. But yes, I would certainly re-engage for anyone who has corresponded in whatever form, particularly if they've not gotten any responses. I would re-engage and say, we just wanted to get back in your radar screen. We would welcome an opportunity to speak with you, talk more in depth. And then, as Dewan said, probably we'll get a response that then allows for a platform of a real conversation, and we can build from that as has been articulated.
So a little clarification on that. It was not New York, New Jersey that sent the letters directly. It was the letters that we just recently sent. So they're asking, should they follow up to letters that were sent from
Yes. Yeah. So if essentially the ask of everyone on this call is, if you've not already, like yesterday or in near proximity, reached out to your footprint in Congress, do so in whatever form you're comfortable. And then as you yield results, we're going to track that, and then we're going to leverage it to maximize your initial outreach. At the same time, this leadership team and my team are doing things here to, on a parallel track, but we'll also take the engagement and the information we get from your engagement and work that into our parallel process. So, essentially everyone here is taking a homework assignment away to engage, whether it's an email, a tweet, a phone call, whatever it is that you're most comfortable with, to get on the radar, to craft an opportunity to have a dialogue more substantively. And it may not get a response, but it will at least be able to track that and use it to whatever way is strategically in your best interest.
Okay, we have very little time left. There is one quick question about the shuttered venues. And it says, can we explain why event venues were left out of the shutter venue grant, as we've been shut down completely as they were?
Yes.
Would you share that with them?
But you won't like it. So not only were event venues left out, so were lighting production companies, caterers, wedding planners, event designers, event florists, MCs and DJs, the list goes on and on. Most, in fact, of the overarching industry that we all know as the live events industry, that includes our infamous 6 verticals, was in fact left out. That is because there's a very strong, I'm going to call it a lobby. I'll explain what that is. Lobby is what we're trying to possess now. That's our right to talk to our members of Congress and to make change happen, because we're an established organization and we have a dialogue that's ongoing with these folks. So to the extent that we had no lobby 11 months ago, and we have a tiny little barely fledgling lobby now that's just starting to get legs, there were folks that already had communications and were already pushing campaign funding and things like this, that were able to open up that dialogue very, very early and have it in a very specific, focused way for performance venues. Others came in with their lobbyists, and who knows what contributions to what campaigns, that couldn't even speculate on that, but also got theater owners in on it in terms of the movie theaters, and other people got talent agencies linked to it once it was happening. So at some point it was time to pass a law, and they said, let's get this done. Is this everybody? And they all nodded their heads, said, yep, that's everybody. That's why. We were too young. It's plain and simple. We didn't fail. We just weren't in on those conversations, though we tried to be.
The only wrinkle to that, and it continues to be a challenge that, that we'll have to address, is for all of you, a lot of the entities that Dwayne said were left out. I mean, to a degree, we're too diversified, and while that's not an ultimate mountain that we can't climb, it does pose a challenge, as opposed to being able to say, all right, Broadway venue X, Chuck Schumer cares about you, so yeah, they're in, and a few other very tangible, specific entities, of which lighting, caterers, wedding planning, the list goes on. It's together as the live events industry, but it's very diversified. And I think we've got to figure out a way to harness that in these next opportunities.
Wonderful. So it's 4:01. I believe, unless there are any last questions, that my hope for everybody on this call is that you've come away with some new confidence. Dwayne said that these people that we talk to are people. What I like to say is they're no different than us. They put their pants on the same way we do, one leg at a time. And you have to remember, they work for us. You are technically their boss. You are a constituent. Would you avoid speaking to an employee who you needed to do something? And the short answer to that is absolutely not. So remember, you put them in office, they work for us. And it is now our time to make sure that they hear that and they help us. We're not asking for handouts. We're just we're looking for that lifeline, so that soon, and indications are it could be sooner rather than later, and we can only hope, we will be back. I thank everyone on this call. I thank our amazing panelists. They keep me honest. They make sure that I understand enough to be dangerous. I thank everybody that is out there in Zoom land for your trust in us, for your belief in us, and for your willingness to work with us. So I ask that if you aren't, please become an official member and join the organization. If you have a desire to become actively involved, please let us know. Just email info@liveeventscoalition.org. And if you have questions regarding anything that was spoke about today, please reach out to Dwayne or Ivory, and they will make sure that you will get connected to whoever it is that you should. So remember, you are amazing human beings. You have tenacity, you have creativity, you have passion, and we have each other. And that's the most important thing. So thank you, Whit. Thank you, Dwayne, Wendy, Dewan, and Andy, for sharing your stories and for leading this. And I, for one, remain humbled and honored to work with every single one of you. So thank you. We will keep you posted on what's up next. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.